All right, everyone. It sounds like we're going to be as good as we're going to get. We're missing a camera, but that's okay. So if everyone would take their seats, that'd be appreciated. So my name is Rick Nyes. I'm the Development Engineering Supervisor for Clackamas County. And again, I'd like to welcome you to the second Development Forum. This is something that we're planning on doing every 6 months or so. Really the purpose of it is just to engage with the development community, to give the development community's idea of what's coming up in the county, and to provide some education, as well as provide some back and forth discussion about things that we can improve on in the county in terms of our development process, suggestions that you might have for things that we could do better, maybe even tell us how things we're doing that are wonderful. So I wanted to just kind of introduce some of our management team, or have them introduce themselves. I wanted to first start with Dan Johnson, who is actually our new director, moving up from assistant director. So he had a couple announcements he wants to make.
I've never spoken to one of these before. This is kind of weird. I really don't have to? No, you should. Oh, okay. Hey, good morning, everyone. A couple things. I'm going to thank all of you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. One thing I'd ask for your help with, Rick used an interesting term, which is engage our development community. One of the things that we're having to do, it's hard to ask somebody out on a date if we don't know how to get a hold of them. So if there are folks that you know in the community, if there are ways that you know how to message, how to get the word out about this particular event, we would love to hear from you. Please email Rick directly. We're trying to get information out to a broad scope of people. So anything you can do to assist us with that, that'd be great. I do want to thank Rick for his work on this. This is his idea, and also thank the rest of our management group back here that have put together kind of the summary of items for you today, and also for our first meeting. Also, if there are things that interest you, we'd love to hear from you on that as well. Topics, we've got kind of an interesting agenda today about cross-laminated timber and some other topics that are of interest. But if there are things that are near and dear to your heart, please let us know. So.
And just to be clear, this wasn't my idea. It was very blatantly stolen from Washington County. So we've actually been talking to them about potentially pairing up and doing this together. So that might be something you see in the future. If I could just have everyone, all the management team, quickly introduce themselves off mic, just so everyone knows who's in the room, that would be wonderful. I also want to acknowledge Commissioner Ken Humberston is in the back there too. He'll be speaking a little later. So welcome, Ken. So just a few quick updates before we get into our program. The first thing I wanted to talk about is just our fee updates for the Department of Transportation and Development. There's a handout at the back that most of you picked up. I'm not going to get into all the details of those fee updates, but we will be taking those to the Board of County Commissioners for review April 3rd. So if you have comments back on those, either in a positive way or in maybe a slightly less positive way, that'd be good to know that now, or at least a week prior to April 3rd. Bill, you had a question? If you want to, I can email those out to you. I can easily do that, so not a problem. We are also working on a roadway standards update right now that it's very soon to be adopted. It's posted on our website right now with all the different proposed changes, and that's largely just to accommodate ADA issues in the road right of way. We've been, I would say, derelict, well, not derelict, but a little rough in our application of ADA applications. So we're working on changes to our roadway standards, and you can, if you had comments on those updates, please provide those to us within the next month. And so they're on our website, you can see those. We're also working on another roadway standards update, and we'll reach out to everyone a little later on with what those changes might look like. So that'll again be posted on our website at some later time. Next, I wanted to invite Cheryl up here to talk about some of our updates for our E-plans process, as well as updates to our grading ordinance.
Hey, good morning, everybody. For those of you who know what it is, Happy Pie Day. Anybody else know what that is? Woo! I know, right? That would have been great this early in the morning. Yeah. Electronic plan review. Building codes in the whole of Clackamas County is looking going electronic. And we're at the start of this initiative. If you were here last time, I kind of gave an overview of how we're scoping the project. But we found a vendor that we're pretty interested in, and we are wanting to offer to you a preview of what that system looks like. And so we were thinking of doing it in a small session after the next development forum. So just kind of wanting a quick straw poll, raise of hands, anybody interested in seeing a preview of it? Great. Would people be more interested to do it in a separate session, if you separate session, or after the development forum? Oh, perfect. That's what I needed to know. The second thing on our work plan is our grading ordinance. It's pretty groovy and it needs some updating. It's on our work plan. We're going to be doing a draft and having it ready by this summer. We'll bringing it here for comment, and then we're also going to be doing a public comment, a formal public comment period. But we wanted to mention it today in case you have thoughts or ideas or things you'd like to see in the grading ordinance. My card is in the back, or you can stop me and I can give you my card because I'd like to hear your thoughts as we start putting it together. Any questions on those two? Great, quick update. I'm going to hand it off to Mike McAllister, and he's going to talk about some changes to the septic permitting program.
Thank you. Good morning. Again, my name is Mike McAllister, and I'm the planning director, and I've been managing the septic and on-site wastewater program for about 3 years now. Just a couple staff updates. We had about 40% of the professional planners in the planning department retire in about a 5-month period last summer. It was very interesting and exciting and challenging. And we've actually replaced all those staff with new planners. So we hired 5 new planners in the last 2 or 3 months. They're all on board. Lindsay, the planning manager, and I have been working with them very closely and integrating them into the department and getting them trained up and ready to go. So you will, and they will soon be, next month you will see them out on the front counter, out in the lobby and those sort of things. So we're very excited about it. They're just a great, very quality hires. We're very excited about them. So you may be seeing many new faces out in the lobby in the planning department. Also, the septic staff, we had one of our certified soil scientists take a position in another jurisdiction about last November. We've just hired a new person, a certified soil scientist that has about 7 or 8 years of experience in the field. He is slated to come on to the department in the first week in April. That will bring our septic staff, will be fully staffed as of that date. Very excited about that going into the busy season. But what I want to emphasize or talk about today is beginning March 1, we implemented kind of a new policy for permitting and submitting building permits that involve septic permits. And if you have not picked up one of these handouts at the back of the room, please do so. This flyer's been around out in the lobby for at least a couple months now, talking about some changes that we implemented beginning March 1 for consolidating our permit review for septic and building permits. And basically, what we're trying to do is improve the internal and external coordination of building permits that involve septic permits or have septic system drain fields on the property. And our experience internally is that there are inconsistencies in when building permits and septic permits are actually submitted to the county. In some instances, the building permits are submitted and septic permits are not. That results in actually the building department having plans ready under the technical structural plans ready to go, but they can't be issued because a septic permit was never turned in to the septic department, and there's a delay in that way. We also see inconsistencies with site plans, where in some cases the site plan turned in for the septic permit is different than the site plan for the building permit, and buildings in some places sometimes are on drain fields or alternative drain fields. Sometimes driveways are going over drain fields and those sort of things. So we've moved effective March 1 to a consolidated permit review, which basically requires you to have a septic permit application turned in. It doesn't have to be approved, but the complete septic permit needs to be turned in before the building plans can be submitted to the building department, okay? And what we hope will happen is that actually in that consolidated permit review, your septic permit and your building permit will be done at or very near the same time to be issued to you. So I want to emphasize that the requirement is that the application just be turned in. So it doesn't have to be actually approved by the septic department, but that will ensure that your building permit and your septic permit, one, is that we have the same information, we're building department and the septic department are reviewing the same set of plans, and two, that those permits can be issued and reviewed simultaneously. So the takeaway on this for you is, one, make sure you have one of these, and if you have any project out there that requires review by the septic department, and that's a new house, an addition to a house, really a new pole building, even if there's not even if it's not affecting the septic system or requires septic permit, we're looking at that to make sure that that building is not on the drain field or alternative drain fields. So any of those sort of projects, if those are coming down the pipe, please get to our septic department as early as possible in the process and get those permits turned in. That will make the whole process a little smoother and the timely issuance of permits. So any questions on that? And please grab a flyer, pass them out, give them to your coworkers and to your project managers along the way. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. Just a couple more notes. Just Mike mentioned the enormous amount of new staff he has in his planning division. That's what's happening department-wide. So we see there's approximately 50 new employees in DTD over the past 2 years, which is a huge challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity. And when you walk these halls, you can just kind of feel the new energy, and it's pretty exciting. So just wanted to let you know about that. Also, if there are questions, we want to make sure that those get documented on the microphone. So if you have a question to the speakers, we need to make sure those are done via microphone. So I want to pass back over to Cheryl. I'll be done.
Thanks, Rick. Well, I'm excited because I get to talk about cross-laminated timber. I've been in the building industry for a while now, both as a private design engineer and then in the building codes arena. And one of my favorite things is seeing new technology come onto the market and then seeing it get traction and it becomes something we use every day. I think a lot of us here remember when truss joists came out and we were all super excited about it because they were making I-joists with wood and it was super cool. And there's one vendor, some people are laughing, and it was called Silent Floor, and they had an elephant, and we all remember that. And now you can buy them at Home Depot, and they're used on every project. I think that's a really interesting progression. We see these new technologies come out, and we're all excited about them, and we don't know how to use them, and then we use them every day. Well, cross-laminated timber is kind of one of those new technologies that we're really excited about. I got the opportunity last year to go to the Mass Timber Conference, which is actually happening next week here in Portland. And we were hearing speakers talk about testing and data and analysis that was happening in real time to the point where they're pulling raw data off of tests that are happening as they were speaking. And that's pretty cool. So that's why I'm really excited we're talking about cross-laminated timber. We have 3 speakers here today in our kind of mini forum on cross-laminated. And the first is going to be our own Commissioner Ken Humberston. He has a really big passion for cross-laminated timber, and he's working really hard to make Clackamas County a leader in this new emerging technology. So let's please start by welcoming the Commissioner forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good morning. I hope everybody got some coffee. Is this working? Okay. I don't know how this happened, quite frankly. A couple of years ago, I was in the EDC, and I saw a presentation on cross-laminated timber, and I never worked in the timber industry. In fact, I didn't work in the construction industry. I don't belong to an environmental group of any kind, and yet all of a sudden I find myself talking about cross-laminated timber. It's an incredible technology, and we keep talking about it as new, but frankly, it's been going on for over 20 years in Europe. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're actually
stealing a technology, I like to say, and I will, you know, I won't reinvent the wheel if I can help it. I will steal anything I can if it'll benefit Clackamas County, and that's one of the reasons I'm here today. Cross-laminated timber, for those of you who haven't heard about it or don't know too much about it, the best description I ever heard was plywood on steroids. Take 2x4s or 2x6s, stack them across each other, 3 levels thick, 5 levels, 7 levels, or 9 layers thick, and it's an incredible product that can do an incredible job of weight bearing. It is effective in earthquakes. It's effective in fire resistance. And most importantly, for a certain part of our community, it's very effective in sequestering carbon. One of the first things that we did here in Clackamas County is we asked the environmental community to come to the table and sit down and listen to us about this product and how we envision going forward to harvest the product and use it here in Clackamas County from forest to frame. We have about 3,000 acres in Clackamas County that we harvest at the rate of about 1.8% a year, which means we're on a 50-year cycle. We meet or exceed state standards whenever we can as we harvest our product. By doing that, we were able to convince the environmental community that we mean what we say, that we want to do this in a sustainable manner. It protects the environment, both in terms of flora and fauna. We do setbacks that exceed the state requirement from water, for instance. We will go to the other side of the hill if it's what it takes to not destroy somebody's view shed where we do harvesting. By actually engaging them first, we have 5 environmental groups who have signed on to a qualified letter of support for this project. I want to encourage all of you here today to take a serious look at this technology. I think there's an incredible opportunity right here in Clackamas County to reinvigorate the timber industry, to employ people in the rural areas that are still falling behind, and do something special in your industry. If you haven't been to one of the buildings in Portland or gone down to Oregon State University to see some of the testing they're doing, I'd like to encourage you to do that. You can really see what the possibilities are with this product. Engineers are telling us that as they learn how to use it more effectively, it may be possible to build buildings as much as 80 stories high out of this product. Think about that for your industry. If you work in wood, this is a tremendous opportunity for you. Another option that we have is we have about 50 at least businesses in Clackamas County alone that make metal products. A side business, a spin-off, if you will, could be our metal industry being able to make the joiners that are going to be needed for this product. They're going to be a little different than what we've done in your traditional framework type buildings. So hopefully we can see that as a spin-off that will help build our economy here in Clackamas County. And I lost a train of thought on a specific point I wanted to make. One of the things that we've tried to do with our task force here is work with other government agencies, and in our own government agency, take a look at the building codes and interpret our building codes in a manner that will make it possible for you when you come into the office, if you want to use this product. Our staff are going to be prepared to help you through the building codes and apply them for your construction project. We believe we're very much ahead of the curve on that. I'm not too sure that anybody else has really thought it through, but you'll be able to start here in Clackamas County with a planning department that's ready and willing and able to serve you. I do know that at the state and federal level, they're looking at building codes and how they're going to be changed, but in the interim, we think we're positioned right now to help you use this product to build your buildings. And I'd say that's about it. If you have any questions, see me afterwards. I'll be happy to hang around for a while and I'll answer what questions I can. I really want to encourage you to take a serious look at this product and think about ways that you can use it in your industry and in your projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. He gave a great preview of kind of what CLT is, and that's what our next speaker is going to really focus on. Ethan, I've had the privilege of working with him before, and he is a structural engineer and a regional director for Woodworks. And he has the very enviable job of traveling the West Coast and helping people bring their projects to fruition, whatever timber project it is. He's an expert in cross-laminated timber, and he's going to kind of give us an overview of what the product is and how you can use it in your project. Another thing the commissioner highlighted, though, I do want to say, if you are interested in the conference next week, there's still some seats available. And all those things that he was talking about, from the carbon sequestration to development, how you build the product, to how you put it in your buildings, it's all topics covered in this conference. I highly recommend it if you're interested. But please welcome Ethan. He's going to give us an even deeper view on cross-laminated timber. You've got a
Thanks,
mic.
Cheryl. So I'm going to set up here. Can everybody in the back hear me just fine? Is that good? So yes, I'm Ethan Martin. I'm the Northwest Regional Director for Woodworks. Woodworks is a nonprofit group funded by the Softwood Lumber Board and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, and now we're actually working with some industry partners like Boise Cascade, Louisiana Pacific. And we're just a collaboration of architects and engineers with the concept, if we go educate architects and engineers on wood construction, will that get more wood used? And obviously you've seen the forest fires we're having and the idea of like, get that wood out of the forest, put it somewhere that's useful. So my background, went to Cornell, actually funny enough, did land development. I designed the first in the world offshore oil platform that could resist ice flows in the North Sea. No one had done that yet, and now Exxon and Shell and Conoco all have a copy of that. I started my own company. We designed the largest school in the United States. It was a 470,000 square foot school, $125 million project. Honda dealerships, if you've seen the blue Lucabon entry and the wavy awning on all the Honda car dealerships, that's my design. And that's actually gone global now. Was just in the US, now it's gone global. So I mean, we design with everything. We design with steel, concrete, wood, but when we were doing the school, we wanted to really, as engineers, figure out what was our impact on the environment. And so we spent about 30 grand looking at the environmental footprint of the products we were choosing. So if we were designing a steel column, concrete column, what was that having on the environment? What was using wood products having on the environment? And that's where I do appreciate the wood environmentalists wanting to uphold it to a higher standard. But it is kind of, I laugh a little bit when you're a practicing professional and that concrete is 16 times more polluting than wood and steel is 24 times more polluting than wood. And both carbon dioxide pollution, but the acidification of the atmosphere, the eutrophication potential in the streams and rivers. And so it's so frustrating when you see these environmental groups fighting over this little wood product and the certification when, what kind of got out there for the practicing professional was like, oh, if it is an FSC lumber, then steel and concrete are better. And that is so not the case. And it's like, stop fighting over here. Like, you guys as a whole should get together, start promoting wood as a product because it is so much better. And that's where, buildings like Bullitt Center, which is like Living Building Challenge, one of the top, is above LEED in environmental performance. That was going to be a concrete building, and they couldn't get it to work. And they called me up, and we switched to wood, and it went so far better. They're like, whoa, we didn't realize this. So again, wood products kind of went out all day long. And so my job is to help people on projects. And so Ken mentioned a bunch of them, and these are projects. This is what I do. I go sit down with architects and engineers and work with them on projects, and every one of these pages is a project. So PV Hall's in here, the Advanced Wood Products Manufacturing Center's in here, the Bullitt Center's in here, the projects in Portland are in there. And that's kind of what I do is I sit down one-on-one. I show architects and engineers how to design buildings using wood. Outside of Woodworks, I'm here in Oregon. I was originally on the Governor's Rural Economic Development Council on advancing wood technology for the state of Oregon, and I just wanted to do that on my own sort of thing. And then I'm the one that actually went and changed our state building code to allow those tall buildings to happen in Portland. So we have I have a couple design award books. Does anybody know where the tallest wood building is, modern day tallest wood building is in the United States? Yep, who said it? Peter, there you go. Does anybody know where the largest CLT building is in all of the Western Hemisphere? Oregon's, yeah, you got Oregon right. Yep, who said Hillsborough? There we go, we'll pass that back. So the First Tech Credit Union is one of the projects that I worked on also. And it is currently the largest CLT building by floor area in the entire Western Hemisphere. Now, there's other ones kind of coming in. I've got the 8-story that's done now, the 12-story I'm working on. I've got an 18-story that just popped up, and then I'm also working on a 40-story. So if you think that it's not coming, it's coming. And that's where, Ken mentioned, like if you're on the fence and you're thinking about these wood products, it's coming along. So we're going to talk about the CLT, and there's a clicker in here somewhere. Thanks. So we're just going to talk about what CLT is, where it's been. I mean, the problem I run into, this is geeky me, I'm a structural engineer. I made a scale model of a CLT panel out of balsa wood, so this is not real wood, but these are scale model 2x6s. So you got to layer 2x's in one direction, screen of glue, 2x's perpendicular to that, screen of glue. I make the joke, it's like plywood and glue lam got together and had a baby. So instead of veneers of plywood, it's veneers of 2x's. The way the fiber sourcing works and everything, it's typically 2x8s right now. But so we're going to look at that, and its competition is really reinforced concrete. I get a lot of people coming to me with like wanting to replace I-joists and things like that, and I'm like, why? Like those I-joists are super efficient, budget always plays a role, and so that's where it's great, but it's really meant to compete against reinforced concrete. That's where it prices out, is against reinforced concrete, so that's where we really want to be. So the big push behind it, I mean, environmental footprint plays a big role, but speed of construction is one of the driving factors for this. So basically, these multi-story buildings, here this is an 8-story CLT over a 1-story concrete podium. 8 stories of mass timber built in 27 days. Unheard of. On a building like that, you would probably be looking at close to 3.5 months, 4 months out of concrete. So in less than 1 month, the wood was done. You're typically at 3 to 4 months with concrete. And that's kind of blowing the doors off. The Brock Commons, if you guys followed that, that's the 18-story project up at University of British Columbia. I worked with the main developer on that and the wood framer. And we sat down in the back of this Chinese restaurant one day and we're talking about it and everything. And he's like, yeah, I think I can get it done. I think I can get it done in about 18 weeks. So 18 stories, a story per week. He thought he could get it done. Finished in 9.5 weeks. Like, so even this guy that's a wood expert missed the mark. I mean, the speed of construction is really what pushes this product against other products. So there's a whole bunch of products out there. We've been making glue lams all day long. Nothing's stopping us from doing that. LVL billets. So those are actually LVL billets for making the Metropole parasol. And then again, more curved glue lams, more curved glue lams. The software we have, the engineering software we have to model this nowadays is leaps and bounds beyond what we started out with. I actually started out hand drafting. That gives you an idea like how far back I go. And now the computer programs, you can just plug it in, it spits it out. It's like, oh, that's great. So, it's a CLT is kind of the new word. It's cross-laminated timber. It's kind of the buzzword out there. But we're doing a bunch of NLT, so nail laminated timber, just 2x's on edge. Lots of glue lam gets involved with these. And then LSL and LVL are big billet products. So the demand for lower impact structures, again, the environmental footprint, is literally off the chart. I mean, it's so funny when people start running their life cycle assessment, figuring out the impact of the materials going in their building, and they actually run it, and then they see like, whoa, wait, what? It's like 16 times, 24 times. I mean, steel, on the water pollution part of steel, wood is 1,900% better. I mean, it's dumbfounding when you actually sit down and look at the numbers. So manufacturing technology, I mean, you guys have maybe followed D.R. Johnson, how they've gotten up and going. Valerie one day, she said to me, they went over to Europe and looked at a lot of the machinery and stuff where they're like, just didn't realize how far behind we've gotten in the United States. And so they do have one of the top of the line CNC machine now down in Riddle. And I'll show you a picture of the press and everything. And then material technology, again, that's advancing also. So nail lam timber, we've been doing this all day long. Bunch of 2x's nailed on edge. It's a great product, very inexpensive if you got cheap labor. That's where some manufacturers looked at making NLT in the rural areas and shipping it to, the more developed urban areas. And then LVL and glue lam, we've been doing that forever, and then CLT is kind of the new kid on the block. And so we're doing a little bit of everything. We're doing post and beam, so glue lam posts, glue lam beams, mass timber floor plates, even just 2x6, 2x8, light frame with mass timber floor systems. And then in non-seismic zones, we actually can do the full-on mass timber walls, mass timber floors. High seismic zones, we can't. One of the things that happens with this is everybody thought this was going to be really ductile and flex and bend in a seismic event, and it doesn't. And it's just way too stiff. And so we're doing, on the 12th story, we're doing the CLT as part of a system. And in that system, we have actually steel rods at the edge of this that will actually flex and buckle and bend. And that's what absorbs the seismic energy. So, but non-seismic zone, a wind-governed zone, it's super easy. In a wind-governed zone, the building just literally leans over and comes back. In a seismic, it's moving back and forth, and the building can't absorb that much energy. But in a wind zone, it just leans over and comes back. And that's why we can use CLT full on in non-seismic governed zones. So non-seismic is like Texas and Arkansas and Oklahoma and the whole entire Midwest, a good chunk of the East Coast. The West Coast, just not so much. So pretty picture of it. Again, 3-layer, 5-layer. Typically see 3 layers on a roof and 5 and 7 layers on the floor is what we're typically seeing in these projects. These panels, so again, this is my scale model. This is a scale model only of a 4-foot wide by 20-foot long panel. Normally, these are 8-foot by 40-foot in length. So even my scale model, I couldn't make a scale model full piece of the panel, otherwise I'd be carrying this big chunk of wood around. I mean, that give you an idea how big these panels are. So typically on a building, you're putting in a 10 by 40 panel, so 400 square feet every 15 minutes. That's typically what you're seeing on these jobs. The beauty is you need the strength in the outer layers. The inner layer is just infill material, and that's the beauty of it. You've got scraggly looking trees that aren't doing so well. It's like who cares? You need your strength in the outer layers, and this material inside can be whatever it needs to be. You can have wanes, checks, splits, things like that. Low grade wood in the middle. It's all done to this PRG 320. The beauty of that is a performance-based standard. And so as a manufacturer, you can make up the panel that's most effective for you. So right now, there are manufacturers that are there's one doing a 6-layer panel, funny enough, because they found it to be more efficient for them trying to do their fire calcs and everything. And so all you have to do is it's a performance-based standard. So it says, okay, this panel has to carry 100 pounds. You make the panel up. You got their specifications at PRG 320, how you glue it together and everything, but you just have to make your panel to carry 100 pounds. So there's not a specification that you have to make it exactly this way. And the beauty of that is it lets each manufacturer pick what's most efficient for them. It doesn't paint you into a corner to one standard. So it's all done by APA. So again, how you've seen sheets of plywood with that APA stamp on there. It says APA 24/16 span rating, da-da. These panels are the same thing. It's an APA PRG 320 V1 grade panel. And so the inspectors out there literally just go out and they see the stamp on it, you're good to go. So beauty of that. There's always a strength axis and a weak axis. The nice thing about that is typically if say this was a roof system and you wanted to have a column out there and you wanted to cantilever this panel in a couple directions, normally we're running a beam out here to cantilever over the column, then you're running another beam along here to pick up this very edge. Now, you just stick a column there. This panel can actually cantilever on its own in 2 different directions. So that's why we ended up using it on the roof at the Oregon Zoo, because it could just cantilever off this corner with no extra support, and it gives that architect that thin profile that they really like to see on some of their projects. So that's been a big push for the designers on it. So I put this slide up, and it's kind of funny because it's hard to keep track of, actually. Because originally they gave me the slide and it had 2 North American producers. I'm like, well, no, now there's 5, and now there's going to be 6. And so right now, again, we've got D.R. Johnson. They were the first one making building grade CLT in the United States. Now you've got Smart Lam out of Montana that's manufacturing CLT. KLH just partnered up with International Beam down in Dothan, Alabama. They're manufacturing. Russ Vaughan's setting up his plant in Spokane, Washington. And then Katerra is setting up their plant in Spokane, Washington, but my understanding is they're going to keep that internal. They're not going to actually sell to third parties. So right now we've got 4, and then you've got people there's people like Columbia Vista that have been looking at it for a while. There's another group down in the southeast that's looking at it. Smart Lam just opened up a 2nd plant in Massachusetts, I believe, and a 2nd manufacturer is setting up operations in Massachusetts. So we've gone in the 3-year time frame from 1 manufacturer to now however many that was that I just counted out there. I mean, so it's definitely growing, it's definitely coming. So this is D.R. Johnson's press. Great story behind this. Again, this is part of the governor's rural economic development deal that we were working on. And so one of the big pushes was, again, using our local resources. So a lot of people are getting their presses from Europe. And we said, hey, can't we get somebody in the U.S. to make a press here? So we worked with Oregon State University and their manufacturing group, and we talked to USNR, who's a local manufacturer of heavy equipment like this. And this was great. This is a female engineer that actually put this and designed this together. And it's really cool. So this is a big plate here. Basically, you put the 2x down, you run this screen of glue across the boards, 2x perpendicular to that, screen of glue. Then you roll it in this press, and this big plate here presses down on the panel, and then it cures, over time. And so it's pretty cool to see. So some of the European manufacturers, some of them have just one single hydraulic press. Like it's custom-made piston, it pushes down on that plate, and it presses the panel. That thing breaks, you're down. Like you can't go forward until they get a new piston made, and they're very, very expensive. Some of the other ones over there, they'll do like maybe 8 pistons. And so they're smaller, they've got a whole bunch kind of just sitting on the shelf, but that's kind of money just sitting on the shelf waiting for a piston to break. So when USNR did this one, the engineer, she was like, well, let's go low tech. Fire hose with an air clamp on it. And so basically that's just fire hose clamped at either end. This air hose goes in and has a little fitting that connects to this fire hose. You just fill it up there, that presses that plate down, cures the plate. What happens if an air hose breaks? Just go cut a new section of fire line, put it in, you're back up and running. So really cool, low-tech design that actually works really, really well. I've heard they're actually trying to put in a second press now, just because the demand is so high at the moment. Adhesives, there is good formaldehyde and bad formaldehyde. The urea formaldehyde is the bad formaldehyde, and no North American building product has urea formaldehyde in it anymore. So we don't do that. It's not in any building products. You'll still find it like in cabinetry and things like that, but you won't find it in building products. If you get CLT from a European manufacturer, double check that. Some of the European manufacturers still use urea formaldehyde. And we are doing projects with KLH, Stora Enso, Binder Holtz, from Austria. So we actually are importing CLT from Europe for projects here in the US. So that is happening. So the CLT is really cool. Basically what the engineer and architect draws is what gets built, what gets fabricated. So on site, you're not cutting anything. I mean, door openings, window openings, duct chases, whatever, plumbing chases, those are all pre-cut, prefabricated. So I call it an IKEA flat pack. If you've ever gone to IKEA and you bought the bookshelf system, it's like, you open up, it's like, here's panel A, here's the screw, here's a little wrench, and you put it together, and that's exactly how this is. I mean, literally. And so the panels come out, they've got a barcode on them, they're labeled, that your contractor will have a cut sheet on that says here's where panel 1 goes, panel 2 goes, panel 3 goes. You basically just drop them in place, you hand the guy the screws, you hand him the drill, and he starts drilling. So super fast, super easy, very, very low waste on site. Tolerances, like so the Hundigger that everybody's using to cut these panels, the tolerances are 1/1000th of an inch. Then when the panel dries and moves and shrinks a little bit, it's done at 12% moisture content, so there's a little bit of shift in moisture content, but not like you typically see with wood products. And so there's still the total tolerance movement on these panels is less than 1/16th of an inch, which dumbfounds people using wood. I mean, they're not used to that precision. And so Albina Yard in Portland was one of the funny stories behind that, because we went to the first floor and we went to go slide some panels in and they weren't fitting. And everybody's just like, these are supposed to be precise. What's going on? What happened with this? And it's like, you didn't draw the fillet weld. And they're like, what? So it was a steel plate, and it had a 1/4 inch fillet weld in there. They didn't draw the fillet weld. So they didn't CNC the panel for that fillet weld. That's how precise these things are. So we actually in the field had to route out that fillet weld in the panel, and then we caught it on the next set of shop drawings. So the next set of panels that were made had this little rivet cut out of them. All the panels went in perfectly after that. So again, super, super precise, which is not something that people are typically used to seeing in wood projects. So pretty straightforward, wall system, if non-seismic zone, floor system, you drop in on that. That's one of the things with D.R. Johnson. I was sitting down with him, and they're like, okay, we're going to do an 8-foot press. And I was like, oh, no, you're not. They're they're like, what? And I was like, in the U.S., we still like to platform frame, which is what we call this, where you drop in a wall, you drop in a floor on top of it, and that's called platform framing. We still like to do that a lot in the U.S., and I was like, well, what happens if you make an 8-foot panel, and now you try to drop in the floor, now you got to put lighting and all that stuff down to it, you're going to have like a 6'8" ceiling. Who wants to be in a room with a 6'8" ceiling? So that's where I talked D.R. Johnson into a 10-foot wide press. So now you got a 10-foot panel, you drop in the floor, now you got a couple of feet, and you'll still end up with an 8-foot ceiling in there. So straightforward though. I mean, basically you drop that panel in, you start screwing it down, and you're good to go. They make these screws. These are self-drilling, self-tapping, so you don't have to pre-drill them at all. They're high strength. So like the screws you might get at Home Depot or something like that are probably in the, I don't know, 500 KSI kind of range, 60,000 KSI. So again, way stronger than anything you're going to get at Home Depot. They don't strip out. These actually have to be able to bend to a 45-degree and back without fracturing the crystalline structure in them. So again, in our high seismic zone where this might get bent back and forth, again, very, very resilient screws. So yeah, we just drop them in. You can use, prefabricated, just have a steel fabricator make metal brackets. Simpson makes some of these brackets. And then it's just a bunch of screws, putting them together like in whatever fashion you want. And again, that's what the architect and the engineer, they figure out what's the effective way to design it, build it, and it goes along. Building envelope, so this is like a wall section, floor section there. Wall section, you're gonna have a membrane on there. You don't have to have a membrane on the inside in our heating climate. So the beauty of that is you can leave the inside exposed. So moisture will actually still migrate through the panel. It's just much slower because it's a piece of mass timber. But so you still need a vapor barrier, and that's a water barrier, vapor barrier that stops any rainwater from getting into the panel, but still lets moisture migrate out through the panel. And then we have a standoff system that has exterior insulation on it, a standoff that holds the rain screen, and you can basically build it out from there. So the beauty of these panels too is, again, super tight tolerances. Now you're putting large panel next to a large panel next to a large panel, super tight envelopes. So you're getting passive house design standards out of this stuff, very low air leakage, which again, affects your heating and cooling. So you'll see a lot of passive house in Europe. It's like literally to heat a room like this, they'll have a hairdryer size HVA system because the building's so tight. You just don't need these large MEP units because you're not losing all this leakage out through the walls from the structure itself. Now windows, that's a whole different conversation. So floor system, this is like a little cutaway at the floor right here. So there's a CLT floor. We have to have a decoupler. Any wood product transmits sound faster than steel and concrete. And so we always have to put in a decoupler. And there's people that make this acoustic mat, or it can be like a cork fiber board in there. And that's actually a lightweight concrete topping slab. And basically what that does is when people walk across the room, there's the heel impact that we account for. And that's when people's heels hit the floor, and you don't want it coming back down to the people in the unit below. And if you look at any of the equations on that, it's a fundamental component in the equation of mass. And again, wood's great because it's lightweight, but again, to dampen that heel impact, you need mass. And so we're always having to put some sort of a lightweight concrete topping slab on there. Right now, one of the things that is hurting us in this is that, so this is a table kind of showing the different panels, so 3-layer, 5-layer, 7-layer, 9-layer panel. And this is the loading. So residential is only 40 pounds a square foot, and then you go up to office, it's 50, and then storage, it's like 100 pounds a square foot. And you'll see across this table here, so take a look at a 5-ply, 16 feet is the maximum span, 16 feet is the maximum span, 16 feet is the maximum span, and basically about 16 feet is the maximum span. Everybody's like, why is it 16 feet? Well, these panels are very, very strong, but again, they vibrate when people walk on them and you're moving around. And so we're actually artificially having to hold them at shorter spans just so people are comfortable and they don't bounce too much on us. So load carrying capacity, crazy, crazy load carrying capacity. But vibrational wise, you've got to limit them to a shorter span so that people if I'm walking around, you guys don't throw up because I'm moving around too much. So that's what's hurting us at the moment, but that's where a lot of composite design is starting to come into play. And so the PV Hall, we did some composite design on that. The UMass Amherst, we did some composite design on that, and more and more. So basically, we're figuring out ways to, well, actually, I'll show you a slide later. So embodied carbon, and again, this goes back to that whole environmental footprint. Half the weight of wood is carbon. So when this tree is growing, it's sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and to actually form the cells of wood. That's carbon. So it sucks that carbon dioxide, uses that carbon to form the cells of wood. Half the weight of wood is carbon that it's sucked out of the atmosphere. Every other building product exudes carbon in the atmosphere. So every 1 ton of concrete, it's actually exuding 1 ton of carbon in the atmosphere to make that. And now you've got one that's, actually negative because it's storing carbon. Again, when you start trying to do your environmental footprint, wood wins out all day long. And so that's this number here, the avoided greenhouse gas emissions. Switching this building that would have been concrete, switching it now to wood, we actually sequestered 320 metric tons of carbon dioxide that would have gone in the atmosphere using other building products. And again, you start looking at this, and it's, on the architectural side of things, we got the AIA 2030 challenge, which all the architects, most of the big architecture firms and stuff have signed up for. That's reducing your carbon footprint by 2030. Living Building Challenge has its own directive to reduce carbon footprint. You've seen Obama had his climate action plan to reduce our carbon footprint. And so again, this is where this comes into play. And that's why people are starting to look at switching to mass timber buildings. Without that, we are definitely looking, to do this safely. We aren't just kind of randomly doing this. But the other thing on sustainability is the minimal waste production. Again, all these openings get cut out in the factory. And here's a perfect example. It's not a great picture of that slide there, but we're not going to make this big panel and then cut out that huge door opening. That's actually a little glulam beam across the header there. So again, in the factory, they'll make that really efficient. Andrew Wall is a buddy of mine over in London, and that 8-story CLT building he did is on-site waste. So all the openings and stuff he had to cut once he got on-site fit in a 5-gallon bucket. 8 stories of wood construction, and your wood waste fit in a 5-gallon bucket? Unheard of. Like usually we've got the rollback, and we're dumping in whatever. Yeah, and every week that thing's getting picked up, and so that's how precise this is. It's how fast it is, and that's where we're like, whoa. And developer-wise, this is starting to save you money. I've got a project right now. We're looking at saving about $500,000 on one project just through the speed of construction, the lower waste, and things like that. Again, highly energy efficient, so passive house design, super great insulative values, low air leakage, around these panels, and then disaster resilience. So. This was a 7-story shake table test that was done in Japan. So that's a full scale. That's a full 7-story building. CLT panels, again, platform framing. So it's a wall system, floor system, wall system, floor system. And you can actually see up here at the top some of those Simpson connectors. So these just have the Simpson clips on there. Then panel to panel is just using these screws. And they went to go test this. So this was a 7.2 earthquake. And they went to go test this, and they kind of figured, okay, we're going to test it and something's going to snap, break, whatever. They tested it, nothing happened. Like, well, let's test it again. Ended up testing it 14 times to a 7.2 magnitude earthquake before these hold downs to the platform actually finally started to pull out of the panels. No damage up the building. So again, the downside to this test was, like why I've said we can't use this in a high seismic zone. So super robust, no damage at all. But what happens up here at the top of the building, you want to see maybe about 10% of the energy of the earthquake. So you got your building, ground moves along, and you want it to kind of absorb that energy and slow the building down. They were getting 75, 80% of the energy at the top of the building. So again, that's why we're not using CLT for our lateral system in high seismic, because basically you'd be on the top floor, and that wall that was there is now going to be here. And if your head's there, your head's now against the wall, that's what you don't want. So super resilient, but that's where we've got to figure out ways to dissipate that energy out of it. And that's why we're looking at the rocking wall system that has post-tension rods, and the rods absorb that energy. But plain old CLT can't be a lateral system in our high seismic. Fire resistance, it works really, really well, kind of eye-opener. This was a project, they were trying to do some area separation walls in a building. And so they just kind of went out and did their own tests to start out with. And so they took a 5-ply CLT panel, 5/8 inch type X, 5/8 inch type X, and they basically, this is the sample there, and it has a piston pressing down load on it, 87,000 pounds of load, and they needed a 2-hour separation wall. They went and tested it, and they got 3 hours, 6 minutes. And that's when everybody went, wait, this stuff really doesn't catch on fire. Like, why aren't we doing this? And this one test was the big push for us to get CLT into the International Building Code, our U.S. building code. Even though it's called international, it's actually just the U.S. Acoustic-wise, again, as long as we decouple, we add some mass. It does really well acoustic-wise. Structural flexibility, again, like you'll see, I mean, these are all square plates, but that doesn't mean you can't make a round building. Again, it's all CNC cut. So one of the Norwich Academy, instead of doing 8-foot wide panels, they did 4-foot wide panels, and they sectionalized it to make a round building. So you can make round buildings. You can do different things with it. You're not limited to that. But this is what I was saying before. So normally the cantilever, this corner of this building right here that's kind of hidden behind this slide, typically we'd be running a beam across those 2 columns. You'd have another beam cantilevering out here to pick up this corner of this roof. And here now you got this column, and it's cantilevering in 2 directions just off the column. So again, takes out a lot of that extraneous framing, saves us money. And this is a perfect example of not saving money. They wanted to do it, basically, and it's a really, really cool thing. It's this HBV system, and it's a wire mesh rib that gets epoxied into the CLT. So this stair here, here's this run, a landing, and then the next run coming up. This is actually epoxied into the beam here, and then it's epoxied into the beam up above. There's nothing supporting this landing. It's just cantilevered out there. So they want to do it. They proved that it works. It was about $300,000 just to do this stair. But it's kind of cool. You go stand out there, and as people are going up and down the stairs, it's not moving, it's not bouncing. And so it's pretty cool to see, like, wait, we can cantilever wood off of other wood? Like, how cool is that? So it can be done. And then the other beauty of this is these buildings are 75%, 50 to 75% lighter than a reinforced concrete building. And again, that helps us a lot in the high seismic zone. So if you've got a big, heavy building, and again, the earthquake rolls along, how much that earthquake, puts in and how much your building weighs, that building's trying to go with the ground. So the heavier it is, the harder it is to design your braces, design your foundation to move all that load. Now these are, these buildings are 25% the weight of those buildings. Well, since ground moves, building goes. It just reduces our braces, it reduces our footing costs. You're trying to transfer that load back down into the ground. And so that's helping us a lot in the high seismic zones on the West Coast. And again, reduced construction time. I've talked about this. Again, 8 stories done in 27 days. The Brock Commons, 9.5 weeks. That was 9.5 weeks, not only just the mass timber part of the frame, but they actually put the rain screen on at the same time. So that was putting the building envelope and the floors and columns and everything in 9.5 weeks to do 18 stories. The best part about that story is Urban does a lot of the apartment projects there on campus, and they started another concrete dorm that they normally do on campus. This one was done, dried in, 18 stories. They had just gotten to the 4th floor on the reinforced concrete one they were doing. So again, give you an idea, they're done, dried in an 18-story, and they're just hitting the 4th floor and then the full-on reinforced concrete one. It's wait, why aren't we doing that? And it's great. It's a great story because now Urban's out there we should do this more often. This is what we should be doing. So Franklin Elementary School, again, we can do 1-story, 2-story in our high seismic zone, possibly. This one's actually in West Virginia. But what happens here is your building is still kind of just designed by basic shear. So, a low building, the earthquake comes along, the building's still just going to act like a box sliding on it. It's once you get multi-story, once you get a 3, 4-story, that building wants to start doing this S-curve thing, and that's where CLT just doesn't make sense for lateral systems. So I actually do have some warehouse projects around here and a couple office buildings that we're going to use CLT for the walls and roof on that project because, again, it's a short, flat building. It's just sheer. We can take that. Again, super prefabricated, super precise. It's all CNC cut. You're not cutting things out in the real world. So now I'm just going to run through some pretty projects that we've done. So this was one of the first projects. It's a karate studio in Montana. One of the stories behind this, they were out there building it. Again, it's a bunch of people with screws. And one day the neighbor came out and was oh, you guys are actually working today? I didn't hear anything. again, you don't have pump trucks and concrete trucks running back and forth. It's just a bunch of guys with some drills and a bunch of screws, and you got a crane operator. That's it. So again, noise-wise in the construction site, super low. This is Promega in Madison, Wisconsin. This actually connects two buildings. It's not a great picture here, but this actually forms like an S-curve up here. So again, it doesn't have to be a square box. We can do fancy shapes and basically sectionalize the panels to do a curved shape. So this actually forms an S between that. But this is a perfect example here. This is a composite concrete slab here. Again, they had spans that just weren't working for the CLT, so there's nothing wrong with doing a hybrid building. There's nothing wrong with mixing materials. So that's a reinforced concrete slab, and then we use CLT for the roof, and then glue lamp, post, and beam for everything else. You can do nice square buildings, too. Nothing wrong with that. You know, this is down in California, and again, it's nothing new. I mean, again, cantilever in two directions, glue lamp, post, and beam. They actually wanted the steel columns out here just because. Inside, again, it's nothing rocket science. A lot of people are doing the exposed ductwork, exposed conduit. Just kind of depends on the look you want. We are doing some projects where the conduit's actually being running on top of the panel, and so then all you see is the junction box for the light from the underside. So if the conduit's actually run on top of the panel, it just comes down to an outlet box, then your fixture covers up that outlet box. So you can see the conduit if you want, you can hide it if you want. There's lots of different things we can do. Stanford Heat Recovery Center, just a bunch of big, what do you call it, sun blocking the sun rays, trying to keep the building cool. CLT panels. So again, can be exposed to the outside elements. On top of this, I mean, this has light gauge flashing around it. It has a roofing membrane on top of that, but underside can be left exposed. Typically, we're putting like a polyurethane kind of finish on there to keep it nice and clean. Yeah, reduce the carbon emissions on campus by 50%. Again, another nice square building. This one's a pretty cool deal. They wanted to be able to cantilever in both directions, the same distance. So, you know, it's cantilevering that. It doesn't look right in this picture, but that's actually the same distance there as it is there. So what they did is they took a panel that has the strength axis in that direction, and then they actually screwed another panel to it. So it's actually two panels screwed together so they could cantilever the same distance in both directions. How am I doing for time? Okay, so we'll run through pretty pictures. So with Oregon, we did the governor's executive order. So Western Oregon University kind of stepped up to be one of the first ones to follow that executive order. CLT, again, is very expensive, and they had a really, really low budget. And so we only ended up using CLT at one end of the building, but that building is it's CLT, mass timber at just one little area of the building. The whole rest of it's light frame 2x material. So again, we can mix and match. This is the Oregon Zoo project. It's just a little small elephant enclosure. Again, rubber tire cranes lifting these things in place. They're not real heavy, super easy, super fast. Strap them down. ICHS, this is up in Washington. Again, steel frame structure, and then cantilevered CLT roof beams on it. So it can be high-tech offices if you want. Again, we can kind of do a little bit. What do you want to do? You want to do a manufacturing facility? Here's a manufacturing facility. You know, so we can do office buildings, we do manufacturing facilities. This one's over in Tennessee. What he's doing is he's buying panels from Europe, and then he's doing all the CNC work here in the United States, and then, you know, building the building. So, but Tennessee, he did that super cheap, $55 a square foot installed was his price. West Coast, we're typically a little bit more expensive than that, but not much. Rocky Mountain Institute, high energy, net zero building. Again, when they tried to run their carbon footprint, wood was the only answer. It's the only way you can get to a net zero energy building. This is a hotel in Alabama. One of the beauties of this, we're doing a lot of work with the DoD on this. And so blast resistance, any building on a military base has to be blast resistant. And so we did a bunch of testing with this, and it worked amazingly well. Again, very robust strength-wise. And so this is this one. So they did one last year. They're doing 5 this year. Lend-Lease is. So non-seismic zone, just wind governed. So it does really well, just leaning over, coming back. Again, there's the school in West Virginia, gymnasium for it. UMass Amherst, this is a high-tech building. I got to update these pictures. This building's done. This building's done now. All I have is renderings up. But They did a lot of stuff on this. And this is what I was getting to earlier. Composite design, I think, is going to be the answer. The composite design gets rid of that 16-foot vibrational deal. And so what this is, you're seeing a metal rib here. That's that HBV system. That metal rib is halfway in the panel, then halfway in the concrete. And that metal rib makes the concrete and wood a composite. So the concrete good in compression, wood's great in tension, and that takes that 16 feet and probably puts you at about 23 feet that panel can now span. So when this gets worked out cost effectively, it'll work. WSU Visitor Center, again, glue-in beams, CLT panels. Won't get into that. Well, so we have a building envelope design guide that tells us, here's your panel, membrane, insulation, rain screen. RDH has put this out, so this is free for architects and engineers trying to figure out the building envelope. We, Woodworks, and some other organizations put together a CLT handbook, and that's a free PDF, and it has chapters on everything, for vibration, creep, and fire and sound. And then that's it. That's me. Feel free to call me. The cell number is the best number, the toll-free number. I made myself, which cracks me up. Like, I started working with the wood industry, and I was like, no one has a toll-free number, 855-USE-WOOD? Come on, get with it. But you can call me in toll-free, you can email me. We're a free service, we don't have a membership, we don't charge, and we literally provide free education on how to design buildings using wood. So thank you very much. Any questions? Back?
A question. I heard favorable things as far as the fire understanding that it's not as bad as one might think. But do we have any history of what the fire insurance compares to versus a podium style or typical steel concrete structure?
Yeah, so the question was, what are we doing about fire in general terms? And so yes, the fire resistance is very, very high. If you imagine starting a campfire, don't ever start the campfire by dumping the big log on because it doesn't catch on fire. And that's how the mass timber acts. So with that, we've done a bunch of fire tests. They've turned out really well. With a sprinkler system, it's a joke. With a sprinkler system, there's zero problems with mass timber. The one test they did run, the fire started, they delayed the start of the sprinkler system by 20 minutes and then kicked it on. So it gave the contents time to catch on fire and stuff. Once the sprinkler system kicked on, the fire was extinguished in 6 minutes. The mass timber just doesn't catch on fire. So then the question is, what happens if the water main breaks? And now, there is no water. So then we did a whole bunch of compartment fire tests. We did, I think 5 have been completed thus far. And it basically is like building out the room. So they built out this room 2 stories tall. It's got all the furniture, and they actually add kindling into it to make it burn even hotter. They did all 5 of those tests, and again, 0 damage, actually self-extinguish. And that's the big thing. That's the big thing the fire marshal is wondering about is like, okay, if this thing catches on fire and we don't have water, is it going to then increase the fire because of the material? And the answer is no. So we, the longest compartment fire test was I think it was like 3 hours and like 18 minutes. And again, it burned for 3 hours and 18 minutes and didn't keep burning once it got to the structure. So that's the beauty behind that. As for insurance companies, it's kind of funny to see the European insurance companies don't care. They literally don't care because the way the building code is set up is that compartment has to last 2 hours. This room has to give us 2 hours to get out of the room. So it doesn't matter what your material is. And so that's where the insurance companies in Europe don't care. Here in the US, there's been some discussion about it, but thus far it hasn't, none of the insurance companies. So we've been working with Factory Mutual and some stuff. And they're just kind of like, I don't know. After seeing the fire tests, will we change our insurance rates? Wouldn't we? And so there's been a little bit of a premium on some of the first jobs because it's just the first job, but I don't think you're going to see hey, this is going to cost you that much more. Peter?
So I'm looking at this, and I think it's pretty impressive. But in terms of replacing kind of the concrete and steel, are there any post-tension applications for, say, a podium style?
So the question was, could the CLT replace the post-tension concrete? And the answer is probably not so much. I think you could do it. So one of the caveats with mass timber is it's solid. It's solid mass timber. So if you're going to try and run a post-tension rod down through the bottom of the panel and post-tension it, then you're creating a cavity. And the whole concept of mass timber is you don't have a cavity because one of the things that happens with mass timber is say you had a piece of electrical conduit, screwed to this thing, and someone later on came and put a screw through it and it shorted out that wire with just enough oxygen. This will just sit there and short and char and char and char and char and char, and you never see it. I mean, it would just sit there and keep charring. So if you had an opening in the panel somehow, and someone goes, "Oh, we're just going to put post-tension rods in it," then you're going to have the electrician guy like, "Why don't I run my conduit through that?" Well, then somebody screws through that conduit, and next thing you know, it'll just char, and you'll never see it, like literally. I mean, it could char for weeks, months. You would actually never see it. And then finally it would collapse because it burned from the inside out. So the no concealed spaces, no cavities in the mass timber is going to probably stop you from doing the post-tension kind of concept.
I got one other follow-up question. So I work with a lot of these guys that put in rebar or face concrete. That's a lot of union jobs. Who in the CLT industry is using union labor?
I've got, funny enough, I got a couple projects in Seattle that we're looking at that on.
With the actual manufacturer?
Oh, no, not on the manufacturing side. So the question was, what are we doing about union labor? On the manufacturing side, I don't know. You'd have to talk to D.R. Johnson. You'd have to talk to Structural Lam, Smart Lam, see what they're doing. My gut feeling is we're so rural, there probably isn't union labor. Now, for the construction erection, we are using union labor for some of these jobs. And so, like with Skanska, one of the projects I'm working on with them, it's like, okay, we're gonna have union concrete guys in here doing this, that, and the other, and it's kind of like, okay, do we keep using them for the CLT, or do they finish the concrete work and then we switch over to a whole different like non-union crew for the wood? And so that discussion is kind of happening at the contractor level rather than the manufacturer level. Does that answer your question? Okay.
So who do you see as the driving force to get more of this involved? Is it the developers asking for more of it, the architects pushing the developers to try to use it? Is it engineers trying to tell?
Yes.
Use it?
So the question is like, who's pushing this? The developers, architects, engineers? It's a little bit of everything. I mean, some of the developers, they're starting to see the cost savings based on the speed of construction. So you go in, you show them a building like this, and you're like, okay, you're going to be done, dried in, and then it's like, how many MEP guys can you dump into the building? And shortening your construction schedule by 3 months, 6 months, what is that saving you? And then when that's $500,000 to $1.5 million, all of a sudden the developer's like, whoa, yeah, I want to do that. Architects definitely, when they're trying to meet their sustainability goals and things like that. I mean, again, wood wins out. It's almost mind-numbing how well wood wins out against the other materials. And so you're sitting there designing these buildings, you're trying to meet this carbon footprint reduction. Wood wins out all day long.
Okay,
And
so
so,
the savings then is in the construction timeline, not
Yep.
necessarily in the materials themselves.
correct. Yeah, this funny enough, on a lot of the projects, if you just do material-wise, the CLT has typically been $2 to $3 a square foot more than reinforced concrete on metal deck as for the material purchase price. But all of a sudden it's like, wait, well, your concrete job has a crew of 12. The CLT jobs, crews of 4. So all of a sudden you've cut out a whole chunk of labor in there that you're paying for. Insurance, for 12 people versus insurance for 4 people. Speed of construction. Okay, this is going to go 3 times as fast as this. What's that saving you? So material-wise, when you go purchase the material, this is typically more expensive. But yeah, you start looking at the building holistically. Crane time. So one of the jobs with Anderson was kind of funny. We were sitting around looking at it, I was showing them pictures, and they're like, wait, that's a rubber-tired crane. I was like, yeah, these panels are like 8,000 pounds. And literally the estimator was over in the corner, and he switched out the crane that they'd spec for the job. $700 an hour in savings versus the crane they'd spec. So that's where all these hidden cost savings kind of come into play. So to the point, the highest I've seen, it's coming $7 a square foot less than a reinforced concrete job. But typically we're seeing it when the whole building's done, we're seeing it $2 to $3 to $4 a square foot less than a concrete job.
Okay, so now contractor-wise and installing these, are there a select few that are?
It's growing by the day, literally. So the question was contractors. Who's installing this? Swinnerton by far now has said that they're the ones doing the largest CLT building, the first tech ready. And they've actually not only doing their own jobs, but they're actually now offering to sub out to others like Skanska or Walsh or something like that, because they figured out how to do it. And so there's a little bit of a learning curve, but not much. The guys that did Albina Yard, they did Albina Yard and like, this isn't hard. So then they started their own company.
Legos, right?
Yeah, so they literally did one building, and now they're actually doing timber, like CLT in particular. And I think they've got 2 buildings on the books right now. I know they got one. I don't know if they have the second one just yet, but they've got 2 buildings that they're working on. So there's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not hard. And so, yeah, you're starting to see people that are just typical wood framers. I can do that. You know, even some of the jobs with Skanska and Hoffman that I've talked to, they're like, well, we could do that. Like, we've got steel and concrete guys, and this is just a piece of wood. Yeah. So it's kind of a mix. Last question? All right.
So in our local seismic area, for, let's say we were to consider this for multi-story institution, what's the best combination of materials that you see working together?
So the question is, what do we do about our high seismic, you know, West Coast sort of thing? You know, the 8-story, it's a glulam post and beam system. So glulam columns, glulam beams, CLT floor plates, and our lateral system is a buckling restrained brace, which is actually a steel brace, but it's really cool because it just gets bolted together. So the guy erecting the glulam beams and columns was able to just grab the steel pieces, bring them over, slide in a couple of bolts, and you're done and gone. The other ones are reinforced concrete. We're doing reinforced concrete all day long. They can slip form. So the concrete works well because the concrete is typically going to be your elevator shaft, stair shaft anyways. And so now it's like, well, it's our elevator shaft, stair shaft, and it's our lateral system. Bang, 2-for-1 kind of deal. And we're used to slip forming that. So slip form the concrete all the way up the building and then just come in and bring the mass timber in and tie it to it. A short building is like 5 stories or less. The light frame walls, you know, so a 2x6, you know, wall with plywood and OSB sheathing is our lateral system, works great. So multifamily, things like that. Institutional, what kind of occupancy you're? For healthcare, so we're doing one up in Portland right now. It's going to be glulam post and beam. It's going to have reinforced concrete as a lateral system on that one. So, North Williams, just where the new season is, just funny enough, just south of the 8-story Carbon 12 building. All right, thank you very much. I've got business cards if you want them. Thanks.
Thank you, Ethan. I want to buy a house at IKEA and put it on my car and assemble it myself with one of those screwdrivers because I think that would be awesome. That's so great. Does the furniture come with it? Oh. It has to be IKEA. It has to have a name I can't pronounce. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, and some meatballs. Well, we have a last speaker. Sam Dickey from our Economic Development Department is going to be speaking about what Commissioner Humberson started out with, how we're taking the timber to the final product here in Clackamas County. So please welcome Sam as our final speaker.
Do you have my presentation? Yeah, oh, perfect. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right in the back? Awesome. As Cheryl said, I'm Sam Dickey. I'm with Clackamas County's Economic Development Department. And as a brief bit of history, I'll keep this presentation short. But as a brief bit of history, I've been working on our CLT initiative for about a year and a half. So I came on board as a Hatfield Fellow with Portland State University between grad school, my first and second year of grad school. And I liked CLT so much, I moved from Missouri out here to Oregon just to be involved with the project. And so it's kind of funny, my friends back in Missouri know CLT as fireproof wood, kind of going off of Ethan's presentation, but out here it's become a full-blown force in the construction industry. So I'm going to be giving a presentation on not necessarily the technical side of things, but more of the practical side of things. Why is Clackamas County involved in cross-laminated timber? What can the county gain from it, and what can our residents gain from it? So to begin with, I'll start out with who we are and who I am and what our department does. So this is sort of a collaborative project between our Business and Economic Development Department and our Rural Economic Development Department. And as Commissioner Humberson said earlier, Clackamas County actually owns about 3,200 acres in the process of acquiring additional timberland. So we actually have skin in the game when it comes to timber production. And so that led us into, well, what can we do with our wood manufacturing products community? What can we do with some of our smaller rural communities that have been affected by the loss of timber revenue over the last 20, 25 years in the region, all across the Pacific Northwest? And so we have our agricultural investment plan, our forest investment plan, and our urban lumber initiative, but we really focus on this cross-laminated timber initiative in the last year or so. And as we get into it, we're really focused on 3 things. So here at the county, we want to increase access to raw materials. So specifically pulling wood off of the Mount Hood National Forest, we've actually submitted a Wood Innovations Grant with the Forest Service to partner Clackamas County and the U.S. Forest Service to design something called a purpose-driven harvest plan, which we're bringing in one of our partners, Sustainable Northwest, which is a nonprofit out of Portland. And one of the guys on their board of directors is actually Dr. Norm Johnson, who was a principal author of the Northwest Forest Plan. So we've brought in key partners and strategic partners to actually help increase the timber coming off lands to help revitalize some of our economically distressed communities. The second thing we're focusing on is our building codes division. So we're working with Scott and the building codes department to help define these descriptive pathways to get buildings built here in Clackamas County. And the third thing that we're focusing on is creating and fostering these public and private partnerships. So how can we work with our manufacturing communities? How can we work with our local developers to get not only CLT buildings built here in the county, but to recruit and retain a CLT manufacturer within the region? As Ethan mentioned, D.R. Johnson is the only manufacturer here in Oregon currently, but there are CLT manufacturers popping up all across the country. So what can we do to incentivize CLT producers and glue lam and mass timber producers here to the county? So the first initiative that I mentioned, and the way we sort of framed this was we wanted to look at why are we doing this, how are we going to do it, and then what exactly are we going to do. So if we break it out here, why are we involved with cross-laminated timber? Why are we involved with our supply initiative? And the first reason, quite simply, is we want to increase the volume of timber coming off of our working forests because that gives the county revenue for roads, schools, law enforcement, and infrastructure projects. How are we going to do that? We're going to connect stakeholders with policies, and we're going to increase the local supply, and we're going to increase social license. So this concept that harvesting wood is good. There was an article in the Portland Monthly a couple months ago that highlighted the benefits of cross-laminated timber. And in that article, it talked about how great building with wood was. But there's still a little bit of a disconnect that building with wood is awesome, but harvesting timber that grows in our backyard is not. And so how do we connect the dots between getting folks on board with sustainable harvests, with renewable harvests, and kind of bridging the gap between our economically distressed rural communities and our urban populations here in Clackamas County, which kind of brings us to this map here. And it doesn't show up too great on this board, but essentially Clackamas County is 54% timberland. So we have what we call our raw material zone here, and then we would have our processing zone with towns like Malala, Estacada, traditional mill towns, and then we have our construction zone, our urban zone, so to speak. And so that leads us to what do we want to become? And that's establish Clackamas County as a regional hub utilizing the forest to frame principles. And so all of this leads us to this benefit to developers. We're sort of framing this presentation with what are the benefits to our developers. So you'd have increased road improvements and infrastructure investments, connectivity to locally sourced materials, and then cost advantages. As Ethan mentioned, there are significant cost advantages to building with the material. And if you're pulling the lumber from this part of the county, you're processing it here and you're building with it up in the construction zone, you're seeing additional cost savings on top of that. So the second priority we're working on is specifically with our building codes division here within the county. And so Scott and his team are leading this effort. We're monitoring what's going on with the IBCs, with those international building codes as they're being adopted in. We think that they're going to be codified here in the next year or two. There's a big election coming up amongst all building code officials within the next year or so that the whole Portland metropolitan region is getting involved with to vote, essentially ratifying and allowing CLT buildings to be used in the IBCs. But why are we doing this? Well, specifically, we want to attract CLT construction to the region. How are we going to do it? We're going to work with our building codes officials who have experience already with these prescriptive pathways. And then what are we doing? We're branding Clackamas County as a destination for mass timber. And all of that adds to the benefit to developers, the ease of production, the ease of construction within the region, and it ultimately saves y'all time and money. And that's really what it comes down to, is the bottom line. Making sure it's easy to build with this material. We all know the added benefits of it, but if it's easy to build with and it's going to cost less, that's what's going to get the stuff to be built with. And finally, our third priority is our investment strategy. And so, like I said, we're going to foster public-private partnerships. We're going to utilize all the tools in our economic development toolbox, all the things that the county can leverage to encourage production manufacturers to come to the region and building developers to come to the region as well. So why are we doing this? Well, we want to bring mass timber processing to the region. We want to use new market tax credits, the enterprise zones, and there's something new actually that's just gotten on the governor's radar. It was passed in this last tax bill in the last tax season, and it's actually called the Opportunity Zone, and it's something that essentially works as a 1031 exchange. And so Clackamas County has submitted to the governor several regions that are significantly economically distressed within our county that would qualify for this Opportunity Zone that would allow for a specific strategic investment into those regions. So that would be used to target a developer or to target a large-scale manufacturer to the region. And then what are we going to do? We're going to develop these public-private partnerships to help with those depressed communities. And then how does this all benefit the developers? Well, it's an opportunity for these public-private partnerships. It allows for different incentive initiatives, and it increased the skilled labor workforce here in the county. And I'll talk about this in a minute, but we have actually a meeting later this afternoon with Clackamas Community College. I think one of the questions that was brought up is what sort of union labor is being used to build with the material? And Ethan had answered the question. Up in Seattle and around the region, we're using union labor forces. But I know the Carpenters Union specifically in the region is interested in actually establishing a CLT workforce. And we're having a meeting later today with Clackamas Community College to actually start the beginning processes of investigating whether or not we can start an apprenticeship program at the community college to build with CLT, not just to construct it, but to actually have the local workforce here so we can establish Clackamas County and the surrounding region as a CLT leader. And so all in all, this leads us to Clackamas County is open for business. So we have a couple of opportunities that have emerged over the last couple of months. We've got a DTD-owned site that's interested in selling off and encouraging CLT production. We've got our employment lands and our employment zones and enterprise zones that we can use that are all part of our investment toolbox. We're going to be, as you guys might have heard, we're building a new Clackamas County courthouse. We want to use CLT for that. Across the way there, they're going to be building an OSU extension building, and CLT is in the works, was submitted as part of the architecture design for that building as well. In the city of Milwaukee, Coho Point at Kellogg Creek, right as you're coming in on 99 if you're heading south through Milwaukee. Some of the newest construction, there hasn't been a building built in the downtown core of Milwaukee in 15 years, I was told. And Kellogg Point, Coho Point is going to be a CLT building down there. Lake Oswego is looking at a couple of different sites for it as well. I mean, there's a lot of buzz around CLT, as y'all are aware. But here in Clackamas County, we've got some really exciting prospects. They kind of highlight those economic and environmental co-benefits. And like I mentioned, we're looking at establishing that local workforce here in the county. So all in all, that's how the county can get involved, why we're doing it, how we're going to do it, and essentially what we're going to do. We see it as potentially an amazing opportunity to connect some of those rural, economically distressed communities back with the urban core that we have here in Clackamas County. So if y'all have any questions, I'd love to take them now.
With that, what's the going to Clackamas Community College?
Yeah.
Is that open to the public, or?
That's just a very initial early stage meetings with their apprenticeship program today. It's been on the books for a little while, but we finally got a time to sit down today and to talk about that. As we progress and see if the opportunity is there for potential partnerships, then maybe that'll become more public in the future. But right now, we're just kind of outlining what the program could be. Yeah, great question. Anyone else have any questions about the county's role? Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for letting me come and speak to you today. Appreciate it.
All right, we do have one more presentation today, and I wanted to welcome Deidre Landon, who headed up our transportation SDC systems development charges update recently. So she wanted to give you some information about that. She's our administrative services manager.
Thank you for the introduction. That was quite nice. And I appreciate the people that stayed. I saw a bit of a mass exodus, which made me a little nervous, and I understood why I was last on the agenda after seeing that. Okay. So we're going to actually pull up a web page behind me, but we're going to talk about that kind of last right before I release you, and I'll try not to keep you too long, but we'll open it up for questions at the end in case I didn't cover something or you'd like some additional information. So in 1993, Clackamas County first adopted a transportation system development charge so we could start collecting some additional money so we could add to our transportation system and improve our transportation system as development came through and added traffic to the roads. So it's been in place for quite some time, and we've collected those fees in the unincorporated area of the county since then. Eligible projects, I mean, they can include anything from adding lanes, adding sidewalks. We can even add a traffic signal at an intersection if it will move more traffic through the intersection in a safe manner than what was there before, which is really helpful. So the last plan update before the update we just recently did was done in 2006. It had been since 2008 since our last rate adjustment took place in Clackamas County, so our rates had been pretty steady for quite some time. And it was definitely time to update our plan. We had completed a 20-year transportation system plan update, which meant that we had an entirely new project list than what we had for the original transportation SDC rate. So it was time to get in there and take a look at it, because the first plan, the initial transportation system plan, focused on large capacity projects. We were always building larger roads, bigger roads, more roads. And this most recent transportation system plan looked at it differently and said, you know, rather than looking at all this huge infrastructure that's really expensive to build and then it also becomes costly to maintain, how can we maybe use our existing system better? So we added 300 projects, capital projects, planning projects to our 20-year plan. Not all of those make it on our transportation system development charge plan. If we were to bring all of those projects onto the list, the rate would be astronomical and we would be laughed out of the room, if not assaulted before we tried to leave the room. So ultimately, we had another reason to make the change. In the year 2000, Clackamas County and the city of Happy Valley got together, and we knew that there was going to be a huge amount of development in that kind of Happy Valley area, you know, between, so it's between Multnomah County, Highway 212, 172nd, and I-205. So kind of this postage stamp, but you have a lot of traffic, both from unincorporated Clackamas County and the city of Happy Valley, that were going through that area. We did not have the infrastructure to deal with the building that was going to happen in that area. So we sat down in 2000 and we said, you know, let's actually develop a joint plan. We'll collect money in this area that both of us will put into a pot of money, and we'll identify really specific projects that we would like to build with that money. And between 2000, when we adopted that, and now in 2018, we had built those projects. We were really successful and we identified the projects we wanted done. We built them, and it was a really good time because we were updating our project lists and our plans to say, you know, maybe at this point we'll go ahead and part ways. The city of Happy Valley can have their own project list and rates, and unincorporated area will now just have one rate for anywhere you're building in the unincorporated area. So that worked out pretty well. So I want to talk a little bit about that process of our transportation system development charge update. You have to go through and develop this entire plan, and there's a lot of decisions to make as part of that process. It's pretty technical. So it really took us 2 years to do this update, and we did it really differently. Historically, when you do a transportation planning exercise, what you'll do is you'll have a staff working group, a stakeholder working group, and it's not really common to have all of them sitting at the table at the same time. And we wanted to do that differently because I felt it was really important for the staff to hear the concerns from the developer as we're making decisions, and for the developers to understand staff's viewpoint as we made the decisions. So what we did is we had business leaders, members of the development community, we had the Home Builders Association at the table with us, and then we also had some transportation experts. And over a period of 2 years, we worked through a number of decisions to come up with our final plan. So we identified some really clear criteria. Obviously, we're not going to bring 300 projects onto our list for transportation system development charges. So we worked with those developers to really focus on the projects that were increasing capacity, that were, you know, in development areas, that were corridors between to businesses and jobs and things like that. And so that helped us refine which projects were going to make it on our list. We also had to make a decision on what type of impact are we going to be looking at. Historically, we've only looked at vehicles. We just looked at whether there were additional car trips coming to and from the site. We all talked about it and we decided, you know, there's a lot more than that. There's multimodal at this point, and we decided to look at a multimodal project list for a couple of reasons. For the developer, that's really helpful because if you're building sidewalks or you're asked to do other improvements along your frontage that aren't just vehicle related, you might now be able to get some type of credit for that if it's a project that's on our list. Historically, that would not have been the case. We also had to figure out what traffic impact are we going to look at? Do we want to look at how many total cars come to a site every day, or do we want to look at the impact on like the afternoon commute, let's say? And that was actually a pretty interesting discussion. And ultimately, we did land on the total impact. How many total cars come to and from the site each day really makes the most sense, because this fee is meant to capture the impact of the development. So those were kind of some of the decisions we made. We also then looked at our rate table. For years, Clackamas County had more than 88 rates. We had probably 5 different rates for a movie theater. If you had a matinee movie, you could have a different rate than if you didn't have a matinee. If you had more than 2 screens, it could be more than somebody that just, you know, than a multiplex. And we really looked at that carefully, and we also looked at some of the challenges we'd been facing with tenant improvement permits. So if you had a tenant improvement down in a commercial industrial or an industrial warehouse type area, I apologize, and you were going maybe from a warehouse to a manufacturing or vice versa, that could actually trigger a transportation SDC under our old rate table, because you're changing from one use to another. And that just didn't seem efficient, and it didn't seem fair, and it was really difficult to communicate at the counter, and contractors weren't expecting it. Developers would come in the door and they didn't see this coming. They just thought they were, you know, helping a new tenant get into this space. So we made a decision to change that, and we consolidated similar uses so that we could actually have tenant improvements occur without having to take a look at this and possibly capture some type of a fee, which we think will be really helpful at the front counter. So January 1st, our new plan was officially put into action. This means that there is a new rate for Clackamas County. And so while I will say that the single family home rate did increase, because of our rate consolidation, that's not the case across the board. So some rates may have gone up, some rates may have come down a little bit, depending on what type of a use you're putting in. But for a single family home, our old rate, which again was established and last increased in 2008, was $3,560. And as a result of the new plan and our new rate table, that went up to $4,374 for a family home. So the next thing that we decided to do is really improve how we're getting information out to our customers. We had a website, there was some basic information on there, but it was pretty outdated. We also had a lot of changes as a result of our, we term it the divorce from the city of Happy Valley, where we now have our individual districts. And we really just wanted to be better stewards, I guess, of information and help you guys understand what options we have as far as system development charges. I think a lot of people may not know that Clackamas County offers a TSDC reduction for certain types of developments. If you are a transit-oriented development, for example, you may be eligible for a discount in Clackamas County. So if your development is within a certain proximity to fixed bus lines, and that's not just a TriMet bus line, there's the Sandy area metro line, there's a few other bus lines throughout the county, you could be eligible for some type of a discount. In addition to that, if you're near a light rail station and you have certain densities, you could also be eligible for a discount. We also offer a mixed use development. Whew, man, that is tough for me this morning. Mixed use development discount. So we feel that if you are mixing office and retail, let's say you've got residential and retail, residential and commercial on one site, there's a really good chance the people that live there might go down and get some food that night, and they aren't driving away from the site. We recognize that, we appreciate it, and we offer a discount for that as well. And you can combine the two. If you happen to be a mixed-use development and you're near transit, that's an added bonus. So what we did feel is that we didn't share that information very well before. So we started working with our communications folks and started putting together some handouts and updating our webpage so we could share that with you a little bit more. So on our website, just so that you all are aware of the resources that are out there, this actually is our live website. And I'm sure we can get Rick Nyes to maybe pass out the link to it. But you'll find on there, you'll see our TSDC ordinance. That's really the tech speak. If you wanted the code behind all of these handouts and you just really like the details, that's your link. You can go straight to that link to the ordinance and read our county code that governs this whole program. If you're curious about the fee table, which if, could you click on the fees? That would be great. You can see our current fee table, and we've organized it by type of user. So you can see if you're kind of an automobile service, if you're a bank, you're going to see some residential categories in there. This is where you're going to come if you're curious to see, you know, what your development might cost. And keep in mind, this is only new square footage added. If you're going to go onto a site and you're actually demolishing something that was there before, some type of a structure, and a use is being taken off, you're going to get credit for that use. And we're just looking at the difference. Cheryl, can you go back? Sorry, I should have had a mouse or something up here. That would be really helpful. So and if you could scroll down just a little bit to get more on here. So the TSDC overview, there's actually a printout of that back on the back table. It really just gives an overview of our program, gives basic information. It has contact info if you want to reach out to county staff and ask a question, and it's a great resource. Back up. Yeah, I need the links. Thank you. Okay, perfect. So we also have a handout very specific just to residential permits. So if you're a residential builder and you don't really care about the commercial aspect of things and you just want to get right into the residential, you're curious whether an accessory dwelling unit or a guest home might trigger an SDC. You're wondering if there's anything exempt from residential system development charges. You could click on that residential permits and it would give you that information. For those people involved in commercial, you're going to see a lot of references to a statement of use as you go through our development process. As you go through and route at the counters, people are going to ask you, please fill out this statement of use. Well, where do I find that? You can find it right here. But some of the new things we added on here that I felt was really important, we created an entire handout to walk people through how those reductions for the station area and the mixed use work. So you can click on that and it will actually bring up the tables that show you the density. It kind of lets you know what those reductions could be. And I believe if you add them both together, if you have a project in just the right spot, you can get up to a 40% reduction on your transportation SDCs, which is pretty substantial. If you know anything about these fees, it can be pretty expensive. So the one handout that will be coming soon that I didn't see on here today, we have an installment plan option where people can do a payment plan if they can't pay the full fee up front. And that seems to be, I mean, it's called out in the code, but it's difficult to find. So we actually put a really easy to understand handout together to walk people through. If that's something you're interested in during the building permit process and you don't want to pay this in full, how does that work? Who do you contact? And it just gives some better information. So we'll get that up there before the end of the day today. But really, that's what I wanted to come and talk to you guys about. I have a stack of business cards in the back if anybody really wants to delve into our process on how we did our update, or if you have questions. But do any of you have questions for me today?
Just kind of curious. I live in the unincorporated areas of Clackamas County. I've noticed quite a few private streets, despite the fact that they have time and more homes on it. Is that something that's been talked about in terms of they're all paying the same SDC fees, but yet they're going to be required to.
So the transportation system development charge cannot be used for maintenance in any way, shape, or form. You can only build new facilities with it. And one of the decisions and criteria that we determined as a work group was that we really wanted to focus on arterial and collector and connector roads. So those larger roads that are moving more people through the county, because it's more likely everyone in the county is going to be using those facilities. So you're not going to find a local road on the list, because actually local roads are exempt from, you can't use system development charges to pay for the construction of a local road per state law. So you're not going to find a project or a road that small on the list. As far as the maintenance of them, that really is a separate conversation from the transportation system development charge, but it is a conversation that has been at the forefront of our development review conversations recently. And I know that they've put together kind of a task force to look at that and find out what makes sense. Is it something that maybe with the new House Bill 2017 revenue that, you know, do we have the capacity to maybe help with a few more of those roads? Does it make more sense, or do you have to couple that with a road district, for example, or is it the The HOA, in a lot of cases, will also take care of those smaller roads. So there's a lot of tools in the toolbox for handling those instances.
There was yet another pedestrian hit on Walker Boulevard, 5-year-old. There's been a lot of traffic fatalities on that stretch of road. Is there any way for SDCCs to go towards, feasibility studies to make that safer? Are there any opportunities to use these to
So one of the investments we're making right now as a county is our street lighting district, which is a special district in Clackamas County. Just recently undertook a really large capital project, and they worked really closely with the folks on McLaughlin to agree to annex into our street lighting district so we could add street lighting across that entire stretch of highway, because we know it's a concern for the residents and it is unsafe trying to cross such a wide road in the dark. It's an ODOT facility, so it's one we actually have to coordinate with because it's not a facility we own as a county. But the discussions are, it's definitely known, and we're looking at alternatives and options for making that safer for residents out there. You're welcome. Any other questions? Yes. That's a really good question. So he asked, who determines how we spend those system development charges? So we have from that 20-year transportation system plan, we develop our 5-year capital project list. What ends up happening a lot is that we look for eligible projects that have that are programmed, that maybe have some grants or have some road funding that are also going to be partnered. And so we end up prioritizing those projects a lot through what other funding is available, because it's not very common you can build 100% of a project using these system development charges. Usually it's a percentage of the cost can be covered by these. But the other thing, oh man, how did I just lose my train of thought? I had another one for you. Oh, I know what it is. So the other thing that prioritizes these projects, I apologize, is developers building. So if you have a development that comes in, a good example, it's from our old Happy Valley Joint District, but on 172nd and Sunnyside, when Graymore built that Fred Meyer development there on the corner, they ended up receiving system development charge credit vouchers that they could use towards their assessment. And that essentially does prioritize to some extent how we spend that money, because it's just a different way of paying for those capital improvements. So if you have a developer that comes in and they happen to have frontage on one of these projects, it does end up prioritizing the list for us because that's where the demand was. And now there's going to be added impact there from that development. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and they're actually in conversations really, they've had a lot of conversations with the city about that because that's been annexed into the city of Happy Valley. And so they've been, Graymore was a part of the work group, and so they've been talking with the city a lot about how that works and what's a reasonable improvement to ask for based on the credits you get back for building that improvement. And that's something that changed a lot under our new plan. So you used to get a pretty small percentage of the cost. If you're a developer and you're building this, you would get a percentage on the dollar back in credit. That changed a lot under our new plan, and developers now get a lot more credit to put towards the actual TSDC cost itself when you come in for permits. So that was a nice change as well. Any other questions? It's not your last opportunity. Again, I've got business cards back there, and if you think of something later and you're like, man, I wish I had asked that question, please feel free. I'd be happy to follow up with you and answer any questions. Thank you.
So we are out of time. Does anyone have any quick questions about the forum or just the way the county operates or anything like that? All right. Thank you, everyone, for taking time today to do this. Appreciate it.